Of course, there are really terrible things going on all around the world. Terrible things all the time, of natures that we don't even want to imagine, and for reasons that we can't possibly fathom. Right now, there's a situation in Dallas, I think the place is Colleyville, at the Beth-Israel Synagogue, where what's thought to be 4 hostages, including the rabbi, are being held by what one could probably assume is an Islamic extremist. So it's a terrorist situation. The terrorist is a male who has stated that he is the brother of Dr. Aafia, I think it's Siddiwui, and she is in jail in Port Worth. She's in prison, locked up for trying to assassinate American soldiers in Afghanistan. She was arrested in New York and she's now being held in Fort Worth. He's stating that he's her brother, so I'm not sure if this is true or not. It could well be that it is her brother. And he's wanting to talk to her and have her released probably, or bad things are going to happen. And he is saying that this is his day to die, that he is prepared. Of course, he's probably been promised 1,000 virgins in heaven. He made the rabbi contact another rabbi to send his demands, I think. What was happening when he entered the synagogue was the rabbi was live streaming on Facebook the worship service, and so a few minutes of that service were actually captured and seen. The SWAT teams are there, of course, and of course Aafia Siddiwiui's lawyer is saying, of course she doesn't condone such behaviour. Yeah, she's turned into a pacifist all of a sudden instead of a radicalised extremist. Anywho, Downunder hasn't escaped this type of attack, and indeed Australian men have been responsible for an attack here in Australia and an attack in New Zealand. The Australian attack, it was back in, it went overnight, the 15th and 16th of December in 2014 at the Lindt Cafe. So this is, the exquisite Swiss chocolate shop. So, the cafe where you can go in and have beautiful hot chocolates and, chocolate pudding and chocolates and things, okay? In Martin Place, which is a huge wide plaza running sort of east-west up through the centre of Sydney's CBD, running from sort of down a sort of inland harbour area, sort of halfway from there and up to past the high streets where all the shops such as Chanel are. So the plaza where the TV station, Channel 7 network, has its headquarters where, you can peer through the glass and watch the news being read and wave behind the presenters whilst they produce their morning TV shows. And there are 18 hostages, so 10 of them were customers and 8 of them were staff. And the terrorist's name was Manharan Monis, and a combination of mental illness and Islamic extremism, and he was trying to put forth the presentation that he was part of ISIS, which he was not. He was a single acting person who held up this cafe, had a backpack that had a bomb in it, and he had a gun. And one of the hostages, I think her name was Marsha, rang a radio station, 2GB, during the situation and said, look, you know, there's been no negotiations. They're leaving us here to die. So for 16 hours, these people were in this incredibly tense situation. Some people ran to safety. They managed to get out a side door and run to safety into the arms of some of the tactical operations unit officers, who eventually, once they heard gunshot, stormed the Lindt Cafe. And man had shot the cafe manager, I think it was Tory Johnson. Tory is a male. It's not Tory as in Victoria. He was shot, and Katrina Dawson, a civilian, was killed by ricochet gunfire that the tactical team fired. And so Manharan Monis made the third victim of his siege of the Lindt Cafe. So that was pretty awful. It had Australia on the edge of its seat, probably the world. And afterwards, you know, Martin Place was turned into just a floral sea. New Zealand's terrorist situation was recently, that was 15th of March 2019, a single gunman again. This guy was Brenton Harrison Tarrant, and actually he was from New South Wales in Australia, a place called Grafton, which is this big country town that, you know, anyone that does a little bit of travelling up and down the eastern seaboard, you know, you're always going through Grafton on your way south from Queensland to get to the mid-coast, places like Coffs Harbour, etc. There's huge river systems running through the northern New South Wales area. It's farming country. It's got all these historic towns that are lined with these big old trees, and Grafton is one of these towns. But I guess it slowly had, a leak of its youth who move out to the cities or nearby coastal towns. And he acted pretty quickly upon these mosques because, from what I know, which isn't very much about it, but I believe the mosques that he attacked, the two that he did attack, were fairly newly established, maybe only even a year prior. He was armed to the hilt with so many different types of guns, including a Predator bolt action. And this was all in the name of white supremacy, or, to show that mass immigration is happening everywhere around the world, even these little isolated countries like New Zealand. And the belief of Brenton is that, people immigrating into certain places who are of the Muslim faith, they don't want to just come in and integrate and just live there peacefully, practicing their religion and respecting everybody else. They want to turn the country into a Muslim country. It's true that they have their own school system, that they often don't integrate beyond the suburbs that they live in, that they have things going on in schools and in community groups that others do not know about, guest speakers and the like, and people are radicalized through people that, let's just say, infiltrate their communities. Of course, they go for the weak and vulnerable. We've got, Jihad Jake. There's something for you to look up. Maybe they're not sacrificing their own, right? They will convert lost souls into jihadists. Anywho, I'm getting myself in trouble here even just talking about this in such a manner, I guess. Just stating Brenton's beliefs. There was a lot involved with this. There's a lot attributed to him by others, what his motives were, etc. Just like there were on man Harris Monis in Sydney. Now, the Christchurch terrorist event, of course, the conspiracy theorists are saying that it never happened. Brenton Tarrant filmed the first half of his attack, so you can see him driving in. I think he streamed it on Facebook. There's 17 minutes of terrifying footage where he's coming in, he's playing certain songs, military songs, British military songs, etc. And, he first goes to Al Noor Mosque. This is about 20 to 2 in the afternoon. A man there greets him. "Hello, brother." Tarrant shoots him down. And after this comes the most horrific, bloody scenes, bodies strewn everywhere. He used a strobe light to discombobulate his victims. Not only did he go there, he then continued on to the Linwood Islamic Centre, and again, this was near the city centre in Christchurch, these two mosques, and opened fire there, and he was on his way to Ashburton. This is probably an hour and a half's drive out of Christchurch, and that was going to be his third point of attack. And 40 other people were harmed, and 51. I think the eventual death toll was 51. I think 49 on the day, and then 2 people died of their injuries later. And Brenton's in jail now. That happened really quickly because it was just over 10 minutes from the start of one to the next place. That was very quick. And then he was arrested. It happened very quickly. The Lindt Cafe was 16 hours. So what's going to happen in Colleyville and Dallas, right? There's the danger, I guess, with something happening as it did in Lindt Cafe, Synagoge, where a civilian is killed. But you don't mess around with these motherfuckers, There's no negotiating, and they just need to just go in. The Australian police forces got a lot of flack for the way they handled the siege in Sydney at Lindt Cafe, for not taking action. I mean, of course, the forces here, they hadn't had this real life event. They didn't have precedence for it. Of course, they're trained. It's the tactical operations team that was in control. But I think from vague memory, there was there was argument and misunderstanding about who really was in control, who should be giving the directions, giving instructions on how to act. I think you just have to, take it straight to the top and leave it to the tactical teams that have the most training. Speaking of training, the police commissioner at the time, Mike Bush, was being met by Profiling Evil's Mike King. This is from Mike King's mouth. He was there talking to the police commissioner in Christchurch at the time, as I understand it. And so what's going to happen with this hostage situation in Dallas, Texas? The person that this man says he is there wanting to free or wanting to speak with, at least, is a see you next Tuesday. She, like many people, have used a country for the education and for networking, when really there is black hate in their heart, whether or not they, have been born and raised that way or radicalised, who's to say? This happens in Australia as well. Universities are these hotbeds of recruitment for spies, for foreign agency staff, if you will. Throughout Melbourne universities, it's very well known that China has created a huge network of spies out of the students and the graduates of Australian universities. This happens all around the world. They're not afraid to threaten people. They find someone with a certain weak link maybe in their family, someone who can be blackmailed. Their family will be killed if they don't spy for their country. And why should anyone trust anyone, nearly, is, trust no one. Fox Mulder, he's telling you, they're telling you, trust no one. Yeah. So all around the world, people, people are being educated in how to, make, in engineering, or how to make weapons, and all these skills and things that they go and then use for the good of their own country's government against those who educated, housed and cared for them, nurtured them in a way. So, they are parasites, they are parasitical. It's like the cuckoo, isn't it? It's like the cuckoo laying the egg in the magpie's nest and allowing the magpie to raise their big lug of a baby. And then the baby goes through and, of course, finds its own kind. It's cuckoo and makes more little baby cuckoos being raised by magpies. So, these events, they are absolutely dreadful wherever they happen, and whether it's one life threatened or lost, or 50 lives threatened and lost, they're all a tragedy. For people to, is it individuals feeling desperate? Is it organizations being extremely manipulative and dark, but you're not allowed to say anything because of the good people, the people that are just living their lives, right? Whilst they know that they're not cleaning up their own act. Like, they're not taking care of the business that is in their petri dish, if you will, right? It's left for others. Oh, but it's nothing to do with us. So why should we counter terrorism, say the Islamists, right? Don't come for me. This is not a racist rant. This is just reflecting what happens in the world. How many times do you see people from these religious groups fighting against the bad that is in their group? It's not often, is it? And is it, if you're silent, you're compliant, you're in agreement because you're not fighting against it, you're not doing anything to make it impossible to happen, you're not seeing what is going on with infiltration or radicalization, and you're not stopping it when you have the power to. And then when things happen, you're saying, well, don't judge us all by that, and this happens. Look, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. Okay. This is groups of all type, all over the world. Was it Christopher Hitchens, who before his death stated that he believed the biggest threat to world peace was in fact Islam? I'm not sure if that's attributed to him correctly. You're not allowed to state what your fears are, that people don't just want to live together, they want to eradicate and live their way, right? It is such a difficult line. It is so hard to navigate. It is such a minefield to try to be able to have open discussion about things in a way where you can express your fears, but have an open discussion and not be called a bigot, a racist, an ignoramus, all of these things, which are just weaponized words against you. It is to shut you up. And things escalate and escalate. But this is across the board in so many religions or sectors, etc., right? And we've got so much troubling us in the world today. Who's to say what the greatest threat to anything is? I mean, I'd say that it is bending over and just letting things happen, right? As we've got happening over here in Australia, our rights. It's immoral and illegal what is happening here, and yet it's still happening. And as if everyone is just in an absolute daze. Some are just doing it because they think it's the right thing to do, or they just don't want to be excluded. They want to be able to eat in restaurants. They are forced to do things because they will lose their job. Rather than if everyone just stood up, wouldn't be in this situation. If you just say no and carry on and do sensible things. Staying home when you're sick, wearing a mask if you're unwell, or wearing a mask. I guess we've had to at certain times, although, I believe that They're never worn correctly anyway. People are making themselves sick through touching them. I don't know if they really work. But, you know, I'm not the doctor and scientist qualified enough with, say, 20 years of study and experience to be able to tell any person that. Although Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand would like everyone to become an ambassador for the vaccine, right? Tell your neighbour, tell your friend, tell your family, as if you're qualified to talk about it. You know? Newsreaders disparaging you. Who the fuck are they? They don't know. They don't know anything about SARS-CoV-2. So who are they to tell you about the jibby-jabby, to shame you for it, to ridicule you for it, to turn people into pariahs, to turn people into scapegoats, to turn them into lepers, right? Newsreaders, disc jockeys on the radio, these blabbermouth commentators, I guess kind of like me, just some civilian, right? Weathermen having opinions. Just go out and get your booster. Just go out and get your 4th booster. It's, you know, I think people realise by now that you can't just take this shot every 6 months for the rest of your life. And they realise that people who've had 3 doses are getting sick, passing it on. Australia has over $1.2 trillion of debt. Our economy has been destroyed, decimated. People's mental health has been decimated. How do you come back from it? Now, I guess New Zealand and Australia, these sort of isolated countries in a way, especially New Zealand, wanting to really secure the future and the health and safety of citizens, have taken some very hardcore measures that maybe weren't possible in certain countries such as the United States of America. The thing is, the directions, the instructions, the rules, the mandates have all been so bonkers, wishy-washy, crazy, all over the place. Sorry, I'm speaking sort of harshly, haven't I been? They've just been completely bonkers, making no sense. And, you know, and people can't go to a funeral, right? This has devastation for the rest of people's lives, not to be able to go to a father's funeral, not to be able to hold a funeral. But you can have a sporting event with 50,000 people. You can't have something for the soul like a classical music concert of 1,000 people. But you can have yet another sporting event of 50,000 people. You have to, you know, we're seeing, you see people driving their cars on their own wearing a mask, or riding their bicycles, probably doing 120 Ks before work in the morning, wearing a mask. And at the same time, children and adults are allowed into a swimming pool, swimming together, taking their masks off, wearing a mask through the foyer, But then all in there, swimming together, doing some coaching, sitting on the grass, eating a sandwich together, grandmothers and little children and teenagers, and right, it's bonkers. Bonkers. So, you know, there's definitely two classes of people. Our people over here, a lot of them, they can't, so they're not getting access to goods and services unless it's, say, junk, you know. So I saw the Steggles truck was at a fast food restaurant shop dropping off the chicken, so I guess there'll be the fast food chicken available at some places. Whilst, you know, in the supermarket, you might have seen in my video I made the last post for Bruiser. You know, you can see that the supermarket shelves, because of our border closures and things, you know, trucks aren't getting through, and certain states have grocery items and some don't. Did you know that you're not allowed to buy more than one pack of toilet tissue wipes? Right? No more than 2 packs of sausages at a time. Crazy. Maybe this is because of all the stockpiling that went on 2 years ago. People were buying up, you know, rooms full of toilet paper. So this is at major supermarkets, though. You can probably go to your local dollar store and the reject shop and things and probably get as much toilet tissue and things like that as your little butt desires. But yeah, so there's the situation in Dallas. We have had these similar situations down here, grossly violent situations. One of them extremely poorly mishandled, and a civilian was murdered by ricochet of gunshot from police, and a hostage was murdered by the terrorist, and that terrorist was killed. And another where over 50 people were killed and nearly another 50 were injured in an absolutely horrific shooting, which is very recent, 2019. Christchurch made just what a terrible place for something like this to happen, if it's going to happen, because Christchurch, you may be aware of as the location for all the terrible earthquakes that devastated the old city. So a lot of New Zealand towns, especially down the South Island there, are historic with old stone buildings that are the oldest that we have in the country, and our history isn't that old. But, you know, everything liquefying, like the liquefaction of the ground. People would rebuild only to have their homes and businesses devastated again by further earthquakes. So they've really suffered down there. And then to have this Tarrant guy go over from Australia to make his stand there, saying that it's because he wanted to prove that even a little country like New Zealand is not safe from invasion and takeover. The way he wanted to do that was to, you know, kill as many innocent people as possible. He's a despicable person, but, you know, I'd have to say that Monas and Tarrant, clearly that there's mental health issues there, as well as whatever political beliefs they hold. And I'm wondering if that's going to be the case with the man that's saying he is Dr. Siddiqui's brother. So I'm going to pop back on and listen to the news now. I never intended to talk this long. I'll speak to you later. Sorry for a bit of a rant. Look, you know, I do think uphold your traditional values and cultures, of course, in your home and in your communities with people where you feel belonging, but you have to respect the country that you live in as well and uphold their values and cultures. You don't have to hold the same religious beliefs, but you have to, I think, want to try to integrate and live openly and with mutual respect and mutual understanding. And when you don't do anything to fight, to nip terrorism in the bud from its root, which is within your own groups, of course, it makes people suspect that deep down you share the beliefs of the extremist. How else can people think? And we don't, that is gaslighting. I don't know the word for it, but that is forcing an identity and a belief system onto people that they don't want to have, because you take advantage of the fact that people want to be welcoming, open, loving. It's not natural. People seem to think that a melting pot is natural, and it's actually not. But there needs to be some way that people from different cultures and different countries, sharing countries together, can live side by side, right? And not have fear of each other and mistrust. But that is difficult, and this is just ingrained. This is as basic as biology. Two sexes and what each sex is programmed to want from the other, no matter what else comes into it. Okay, so look, I'll leave it at that. All right, and thanks for listening. I'll speak to you later.